Hello there, History St. Louis, and welcome to our last lesson of Unit 2. Today we go ahead and look at two extremely historic areas, uh, Bellefontaine and Calvary cemeteries. Both of these were created just after the cholera epidemic of 1849. No real connection, it's just coincidence. Both of those we're going to see are created because of something called the rural cemetery movement. Basically, cemeteries in the city, which were connected and mostly right next door to churches, that land was becoming too valuable to be used for cemeteries, and so those bodies were dug up and moved, usually outside of the city limits, and then the land was then used for commercial or residential purposes because land was just too valuable in cities. So these are two of my favorite places to visit in St. Louis, and so I hope you enjoy today's video. I'm going to play it and stop it along the way to make comments, but I hope you enjoy. So this is an aerial view of Bellefontaine Cemetery, and you can see how it looks a lot like a park. Next door is Calvary, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Led by banker William McPherson, the trustees of the association purchased 138 acres north of the city, including the Hempstead family farm with its family graveyard. With graves dating back to 1817, this is the oldest lot in the cemetery. Over the next 22 years, the cemetery would purchase additional land, including a part from John O'Fallon's estate, which today totals 314 acres. So this is the entrance to Bellefontaine Cemetery. This is actually originally the back entrance, but now it is the front entrance. And then a little bit about the rural cemetery movement. This movement sought to establish cities of the dead in park-like settings outside of urban centers, so that those who had died could truly rest in peace. The rural setting also allowed visitors to reflect and remember in dignified natural surroundings, far from distractions of the city. And so basically what you're going to see in these two cemeteries is something very different than from modern cemeteries. Modern cemeteries look more like military cemeteries where we have straight rows and straight columns and everything is orderly and symmetrical. You're not going to see that here. You're going to see basically these cemeteries are broken up into plots, and then families are just randomly put throughout these plots. So there's really no order. It looks like a park, and it was also treated like a park. When you came out to these cemeteries, you were spending the day really with your loved one in a park setting. Families would bring picnic lunches, and you would spend a majority of the day away from the city, away from the heat, away from the stink, and really focused on your loved one. Here is a above ground burial called a sarcophagus. And you will see these not too much in St. Louis, but they are sprinkled throughout both of these cemeteries. This is a popular, in fact, it's almost mandatory in New Orleans because New Orleans sits below sea level, so they are not allowed to build cemeteries underground. The gravesite has to be above ground, either in a mausoleum or, in this case, a sarcophagus. You also will see throughout both of these cemeteries the very intricate art and statue scenes that people have. And then obviously you'll notice that the more richer people have more elaborate, more expansive grave sites, where the more middle class, lower class people will have less elaborate grave sites. St. Louis was prompted to establish its own rural cemetery in 1849 for a number of reasons. Like other cities that embraced the rural model, St. Louis was growing by leaps and bounds. As commercial, industrial, and residential growth pushed the city's limits westward, older burial grounds near the riverfront closed and bodies had to be reinterred time and again. Although there were 22 cemeteries located in St. Louis in 1849, most were growing crowded with no room for expansion to accommodate the booming population. Equally troubling to the proponents of the rural cemeteries was the impermanence and impersonality of these old burial places, often poorly maintained and mostly forgotten, overwhelmed by the noise and bustle of the city life. And when you go and visit these two cemeteries today, you will see that they are immaculately kept and very well cared for. Families are in charge of their gravesite, but the cemetery itself is in charge of the grounds. Bellefontaine Cemetery was part of the 250-year celebration of St. Louis, where they placed birthday cakes throughout the city. Some cemetery facts. The first burial was April of 1850, although it opened in 1849. The number of grave sites today is a little over 88,000. Originally, the cemetery was 138 acres, but with additions and whatnot, it is now 314. There is plenty of space for more. All right, so now you're going to have, and by the way, that information, all of this information, I should have said earlier, needs to be completed on a worksheet that teachers should provide you with little spaces to fill in. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at some of the more famous grave sites in Bellefontaine Cemetery, and I will give you basically a little bit of the artistic description of it and some of the symbolisms built into these. So our first grave, go ahead and jot down, is going to be Adolphus Busch, one of the co-creators of Anheuser-Busch Brewery. And his mausoleum is probably the most elaborate of them all. It is made to look like a German Gothic church, and so you want to write down that bullet point. He was the first to die. This gravesite is just he and his wife. He was the first to die, so this was literally his gravesite. Originally, he was buried in another mausoleum, but his wife did not think it was grand enough for her husband, and so she had this one built in 1915. This is a picture of Adolphus Busch later in his life. He will be co-founder of Anheuser-Busch. And here is a look at the mausoleum today. As you can see, it is made out of granite, and you're going to want to add that to your description. This is Missouri pink granite. You also see that it does have a copper gate, which has patinaed nicely over the years. Behind that gate is two smoke glass doors so that you can see inside, and I'll show you what the inside of this looks like a little bit later on. As we zoom in, the nameplate above the door is pretty intricate. As you can see here, you have a king carved into stone right here. You have a queen carved into the stone right here. And then you've got the nameplate right here. And then you've got all of this hand-carved intricacies. And as we zoom in, you'll notice right around in here and right around here, it will look like grapes. And that is because Adolphus Busch was a lover of wine. In fact, he didn't drink beer. He didn't drink his own product. He was a connoisseur of wine, and he wanted that to be known in his mausoleum, and so that is why you see grapes and grapevines above his door. As we zoom in, it has his name and then his years of life and birth and death, and then the very famous Latin phrase "Veni, Vidi, Vici," which was first uttered by Caesar, and it translates into "I came, I saw, I conquered." And this was his life motto. I came to the United States, I saw an opportunity to make money, and I conquered the beer industry. And so that is why he has Caesar's very famous phrase above his door. All of this hand chiseled, so very, very expensive to have somebody do this. Again, here is the iron gate or the copper gate, and as we pan up, you'll see that it looks like a German Gothic church. And then right over here, you have what look like to be Brussels sprouts all over the tops of these columns. These are actually not Brussels sprouts. These are hops buds. Hops, as you well know, is used as one of the main ingredients to make beer. And then the different hops gives beer its different flavors. And so he wanted to memorialize his connection with beer, and so he has hops buds all over his mausoleum. That is another little piece of information that you'll want to jot down. This is the inside. You can see, jot down in your notes that it is Italian marble on the floor, and then you do have 3 sets of stained glass windows. Set 1 right here, set 2 right here, set 3 right here. And so you'll want to jot down Italian marble flooring and stained glass windows. Adolphus Busch is buried right here. His wife, Lily Anheuser-Busch, is buried right here. So if you were to lift those lids, their caskets would be underneath, and so they are buried into the floor. That's not always how it is, but that is how the Bushes had it done. As you can see right here, again, playing off of the royalty motif, king, knight, sort of like a guardian knight, and then queen right here. That is because he's buried on the left, she is buried on the right. It was said that Miss Bush would have her maids go to the mausoleum once a week to dust on the inside to make sure that it was immaculately kept. Obviously, the family is still doing some of that today because it is immaculate. Here's a little bit of some scenes from the around the site. You can see there that the copper spire right there that's green does have even gargoyles. Gargoyles were a main feature of Gothic architecture, and so to keep that theme, they had those gargoyles added. Various members of the Bush family are also buried around. Grave number 2 is going to be Elias Wainwright. It is known as the Taj Mahal of mausoleums because it was so immaculately designed. It was designed by an architect, Sullivan, who also did Wainwright's office building in downtown St. Louis. This one was actually built for his wife. His wife died first, and it is so well known because of its cube and dome design. And so you're going to want to jot that down in your notes. This is Ellis Wainwright right here. Ellis Wainwright was owner of a brewery. Behind the Bushes and the Lemps, he was probably number 3. And so he had this mausoleum built first for his wife, knowing that he would then be interred there sometime after. Here it is, and you can see the combo of the square and the dome. This is the only one of the few domed mausoleums in Bellefontaine Cemetery. And then obviously you can see once again the copper door. Behind that are 2 steel doors so that you cannot see inside of it. There are 2 side windows that allow you to have a somewhat glimpse of the inside, but the front door is non-seeable. And then you can see all of the hand carving once again. This was done by artisans and highly skilled craftsmen, which would obviously add to the price greatly of the mausoleum cost. Very Art Deco in that it is very geometric and symmetrical. And again, you can see the symmetry and the repeating patterns of all of that hand chiseled uh, detail, which goes all around the cemetery or the mausoleum. So here's a side view of the mausoleum. And then in just a second, I'm going to show you, uh, this was a tour that I went on and we got to go actually inside of it. And so I'm going to explain real briefly what it looks like on the inside. What you're going to want to jot down for the inside is that it has a mosaic decorative pattern. And so as you're going to see here in just a second, the floor, as you see here as we walk in, is all mosaic tiling. So mosaic tiling is basically little pieces of glass and stone cut into very small shapes and then glued down on the floor to form these intricate patterns. And so obviously it is very painstaking to create mosaic tiling and mosaic patterns. So they are buried underneath those two Italian slabs. And then you have the very decorative dome area that is also made out of mosaic. In this case, though, the mosaics are of angels, and I'm going to wait and show you a different view and a better view of that in just a second. We were asked, obviously, to form our group around the grave sites and not to step on the grave sites themselves. And then you see here a little bit better view of what it looked like. So you had these angels, and you can see that they have shimmering halos over their heads, and then you have this shimmering sun. Why is it shimmering? That is because this is 12 karat gold leaf. So think of tin foil, but of gold, and that is inlaid in the mosaic design. This is just absolutely one of a kind and obviously very expensive to do. And you can see that all of the walls, all of the ceiling, and all of the floor is mosaic tiling. So it is very ornate, very expensive. And now you see why it is known as the Taj Mahal of uh, mausoleums. And in fact, people come from all over the United States to see this mausoleum. So just very impressive. Ellis is buried here on the right. His wife Charlotte is buried here on the left. And so there's another good view of the ceiling and all that it has to show. Grave number 3 is literally right across the street from the Wainwright tomb. When you walk outside the Wainwright tomb and you cross the street, you run into the Lemp Mausoleum. And it was the largest mausoleum built in Bellefontaine Cemetery. It was built first in 1902 for William Lemp's son, who died of a heart attack. Currently, there are 15 people that are buried inside of it. And the reason why the Lemps built theirs right across the street from, this is William Lemp, by the way, this is William Lemp Sr. His dad started the business, but really it was William Lemp Sr. who expanded it to the great brewery that it was. This is the brewery, this is the mausoleum, and as you can see, this is Greek Revival architecture because of the Greek columns and the triangular front. The reason why they built this right across the street was because they wanted to block the Wainwright view of the Mississippi Valley back here in the background. The Wainwrights and the Lemps were bitter rivals, and they didn't like each other. And so the Lemps, even in death, wanted to sort of stick their nose at the Wainwrights. And so what better way to do that than to block the beautiful view of the Mississippi Valley area where Bellefontaine is located. And so now they have to look at the Lemp Mausoleum for perpetuity. As you walk up, you can see the Lemp name above the door. The doors are iron, but they do have the window inlay so you can see inside. I'm going to show you what it looks like on the inside in just a second. A little bit more moderately decorated on the outside. And so here you see, instead of being buried in the floor because they wanted to bury multiple members of the family, each family has their own square. And so behind the nameplate is the casket of the Lemp family member. And so there are some openings, as you can see here, nameplates with no names. And then you have ones that have been taken up. And so there are still Lemp family members. In the background you see is a 3-foot stained glass window. William Lemp Sr.'s favorite flower was the yellow daffodil, and so that's why the stained glass window has yellow daffodils on it. And then you can't really see too well because of the reflection, but there are also nameplates on the right side as well. Again, I went on a tour and got to go on the inside of the Lemp mausoleum. You will see a different stained glass window. That is because they had to fix up and reseal the old one. The old one had some leaks in it, and so they had to take it out and connect it back up. Again, you can see the different nameplates, and you can just see how large it is. It is a tall mausoleum. Plenty of headspace in this area, and it was made to look, again, like a Greek temple. Going back now, you can see the inside from a previous encounter. I'm sticking the camera into the windows looking inside, but this is a look inside of it. This is William Lemp Sr. This was his favorite son, Frederick, who died first, and that is why this mausoleum was built. It was built for this Lemp right here, Frederick, and they are buried side by side. This is the next one. Grave number 4 is of Herman Ludes. This is a fun, interesting gravesite. It's fun because of the story that I'm about to tell you, and interesting because of what you're about to see. Herman Ludes was a drugstore owner in the St. Louis area, and there's a picture of Herman Ludes, he was taking a vacation to Italy without his wife, let me remind everybody. And so on that Italian vacation, even though he was married, he was basically single, and he meets a beautiful Italian model. And his vacation being months long, he decided to spend the vacation entirely with her. So when the vacation was over, he basically proposed to her, saying, I want you to come back with me to America and be my wife. She did know that he was married, and she thus said no. But he did not want to be away from his love, so he had a likeness of her made by an Italian artist, and there it is. It is a 12-foot marble statue. I believe it's Carrara marble. And so he had this made and shipped to him in St. Louis, and this stood in his foyer in his St. Louis City home until the floor started to buckle, and then he had to put it in storage. And then in his will, he said that he wanted to have this with him when he was buried. And so to make that happen, they made a 15-foot headstone, and the 12-foot statue fits nicely into that 15-foot headstone. There is plexiglass to protect the statue from the elements, and that's why this one looks so nice compared to other marble statues that have not weathered very well. And so the statue is protected. There's a close-up of her. And so there is the foot plate and then the headstone. So he's buried in between those right there. And so just a beautiful, interesting, You'll notice that the wife is not anywhere around here. She's buried in a different location. They obviously ended up getting a divorce. Grave number 5 is to an American hero, William Clark. Monument to a national hero. So this is the William Clark gravesite, but it did not look like this when he first died. There's a picture of William Clark. Remember, he's most well known for the Corps of Discovery trip with his friend Meriwether Lewis. This is his gravesite today, but it didn't look like this originally. His son, Meriwether Lewis Clark, or excuse me, Jefferson Kearney Clark, paid to have his father's gravesite redone in 1904 because he knew that people were going to be coming from all over the United States to see the World's Fair, and that they were going to come and potentially visit his father's gravesite in order to pay homage to this gentleman. And so he had the gravesite redone in order to make it look more grandeur and fitting of his historic record. And so you can see it consists of a bust, an obelisk, and then this raised stage that has information about his life and about his journeys. And then his family is built around this section right here. As you can see, he was also a mason. An obelisk is a common theme in cemeteries. Here is a bust that gives a little bit of a brief look of his life. And then you'll see other little areas that have nameplates and stories to be told. This one has a buffalo head because he was one of the first Americans to see a live buffalo. This primary exploration through more than 4,000 miles of savage wilderness planted the flag of the United States for the first time on the shores of the Pacific Ocean. It completed the extension of the United States across the vast western region of the American continent and gave us our outlook toward the Orient. And so that's a little bit of perspective of what his trip out west at the Louisiana Territory, why it was important for the United States. On the other side, it'll also have this. This monument was erected by his son, Jefferson Kearney Clark, and then a little bit other about the exploration as well. And there, I believe it's a wolf head. These are other members of the family, George Rogers Hancock Clark, and then this is the one who paid for it all, Jefferson Kearney Clark and his wife, Mary Susan Glasgow Clark. And then the oldest son was a general in the Confederate Army, believe it or not. And so he has a special commemorative plaque for tours about just Civil War people in the cemetery. And then this is a 200-year celebration stone for the Lewis and Clark trip and gives a little bit more information about that trip to the west. Number 6 is the largest family plot in Bellefontaine Cemetery, and that is because he donated some of the land to the cemetery, and that's John O'Fallon. Basically, they are going to be buried in a giant circle. There's John O'Fallon for you. They're going to be buried in a giant circle, and then he's at the center of that circle, and then the family members are buried around the perimeter of that circle. He is the one with the large statue of the lady holding the anchor, and then the family is inside the perimeter border that you can see laid around their area. So then he is buried underneath this giant monument with the words O'Fallon right there, or the word O'Fallon right there. And then the family members are buried in various grave sites around this. The anchor is supposed to be a hidden symbol of Christianity, and it's also said that Christianity is the anchor of one's life. You can also see she's holding a cross across her heart. This is one of his sons, John O'Fallon Jr., and another son, and they are both buried in sarcophaguses, so they are above ground, just again for style more than anything. And then you have some more family members buried around the cemetery. You can again see just how random things are placed in the cemetery. This is, again, a park-like atmosphere, and so It's just so randomly explained or restored. And so you literally have just different family members all buried around. Here is another son of his, Benjamin O'Fallon. Uh, the next grave is another one of these artistic odd ones. William Severson is not a famous person, at least by most known by St. Louisans. If you are an artist or in the artistic community or the architectural community, you might have heard of him. But in order to highlight his artistic talents, he had this unique monument set up. This is a picture of Severson here with two other family members of his. And so this is what's going to end up happening. His gravesite on the summer solstice, winter solstice, and both of the equinoxes, when you go there at noon, you see this perfectly shadowed cross that forms basically by the sun hitting the monument at a certain way. As you can see, the monument has these different slits cut into it, and depending upon the time of the year, those slits will form a cross when the sun hits it at noontime on those four famous days. You can see on this day that you can see part of the slit going across is being formed, but nothing going up down is being formed. But you can kind of see how that works in a live setting. And so this is a pretty unique monument. You would never know that this was here unless you had heard this story or been tipped off by it, which I was, and that's why I was able to show it to you guys. Again, those slits are cut very purposefully in order to make the sun ones. Number 8 is going to be James Eads. We've already covered him a little bit with the salvaging of steamboats. We're also going to talk to him when we talk about the Civil War, and then when his ultimate accomplishment in St. Louis, which is the Eads Bridge. Here's a picture of him. At one time, there was talk of maybe him even running for president. That's how well known he was in the United States. He also has an above ground sarcophagus. He was only 5'2", so you can see that the sarcophagus is not that big. This is also made out of marble, but you can see how marble does not weather very well with acid rain and other sorts of pollutants. And so this would have been gleaming white when it was initially put out there, but over time you can see that the marble has decayed because of the elements. The next gravesite is the Tate family. This is another one of those artistic gravesites that occur because the family owned theaters throughout the United States. And they wanted to make it stand out, and so they chose an Egyptian theme. They were not Egyptian, they were American, but he loved Egyptology, and so he had these built. And in fact, Mr. Tate used his own face as the model for the Sphinxes. And so you might want to jot down that it is Egyptian in style. Sorry, I haven't been giving you very much highlights as what you should write down. Hopefully you can pick it out by now. So Egyptian style, and that Mr. Tate was the model for the Sphinxes. These are some of the stained glass windows on the inside, kind of eerie with those gray eyes. Again, the steel door, but the steel door does have glass on the window part so you can see it. And then that is the mark of the pharaoh with the sun and then the two cobras coming out of it with wings. And so he wanted to have that pharaoh mark listed there. One of the last grave sites that we're going to take a look at is David Francis, who was president of the World's Fair, as well as mayor of St. Louis and governor of Missouri. But as all of those aren't the real important thing that he did. He was the president of the 1904 World's Fair. And so he has a shrouded angel. There's a picture of David Francis. He has an angel sitting at the head of where his family is buried, and she is guarding them, looking over them, and she's known as the perpetual angel because she is perpetually looking over them in a very sort of sad way. You can see many generations of Francis people are buried, and then you can see as I zoom in here to the copper angel, who is now turning a little green because of the weathering, with the Celtic cross behind her. And she does have a face, which I will zoom in here and show you in just a little bit. And so it is realistic. You can kind of see it a little bit there. There's her nose, her mouth, her eyes right here. And so she is known as the perpetual mourner. Some people have said that they have claimed to see her move. She did not when I was there. And so just jot down that David Francis has this guardian angel looking over the family, which is a nice little statue and nice little artistic touch. Again, I zoom in to try to give you a better look of her face. There you go. There's a little bit better look of her face. So you can see it's a realistic, or as realistic as they could attempt. And then I take you just to a couple other mausoleums that you don't need to write down, but just to give you an idea. This is one of the Brown brothers. If you've ever heard of Buster Brown's shoes, the Brown brothers were very big in St. Louis. In fact, they were one of the largest shoe manufacturers. George Warren Brown is buried here. His wife is buried here. And their infant son, who died relatively early in life, is buried beneath his mother right in here. And so just a beautiful mausoleum with some, as you see, beautiful stained glass windows, and then a quote here from the Bible, and then another one right here, another stained glass window right here. So most of the mausoleums did have stained glass windows in them, just not as ornately as these that you're seeing right here. And then this is the Pierce Mausoleum. Pierce was a oil tycoon, and so he has this ornately decorated mausoleum on the inside. I'm going to walk in here, and then he's going to close the door so that you can see what it looks like. The bodies are actually not in here, but they are buried behind those walls right there that look like it's just big wooden doors. Those doors are actually where the bodies are buried, so they're buried into the side of the wall. This is just a fake replica in case somebody tried to go in. So now he closes the doors, and now you can see the beauty of the stained glass windows in there. And he had, I believe, 6 of these done. And so you can see how the interior is really lit up in this beautiful colored light. But it is a little creepy. So that's it for our look at Bellefontaine Cemetery. Tomorrow we'll take a look at Calvary Cemetery, and I hope you enjoyed today's lesson.